It was a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where life felt safe at least from the outside. Inside a modest two-bedroom home lived Emma, a 10-year-old girl with bright eyes and an unshakable spirit. Though her legs had stopped working years ago, confining her to a wheelchair, her heart raced with dreams bigger than most kids her age. Every morning began the same. Her father, Officer James Miller, dressed in his crisp police uniform, kissed her forehead gently before heading out for his long shift. "Be good, Pumpkin. Max will take care of you," he always said. Emma would smile, trying not to show how much she hated being left alone all day. But she wasn't really alone. Beside her, always watchful, was Max, the family's German shepherd. More than just a pet, Max had become her guardian, her shadow, and sometimes even her laughter. He nudged her chair when she felt stuck, barked when someone walked too close to the window, and sat beside her during the lonely hours until her dad came home. That morning, everything seemed ordinary. Sunlight spilled across the living room floor as Emma played with her sketchbook, Max, lying at her feet. She loved drawing worlds where she could run, climb, and chase butterflies, with Max always running by her side. But life, Emma knew, wasn't always fair. She couldn't walk, but she could dream. What she didn't know was that her world was about to change. Not in a small way, not in a gentle way, but in a way that would test the courage of a little girl and the loyalty of her dog like never before. Because on that day, when her father's patrol car pulled away, two shadows lurked nearby, watching. And they weren't there to admire the peaceful house. The day drifted slowly, and Emma kept herself busy with her colored pencils. Max sat by the window, his sharp eyes scanning the street as though he knew he had a duty to perform. Every so often he'd glance back at Emma, and she would smile reassuringly. "I'm fine, Max. You don't have to worry so much," she whispered. But Max didn't relax. His ears twitched, his body alert. He was a protector and something in. The air unsettled him. By mid-afternoon, the house grew quieter than usual. The ticking clock in the kitchen echoed louder, the shadows stretched across the floor, and Emma's small hands gripped her sketchbook tighter. She couldn't explain it, but she felt it to a strange heaviness, like the calm before a storm. Outside, parked 2 blocks away, a dented, old Van Sut idol. Inside were 2 men, whispering, their eyes locked on Emma's house. They had been scouting the neighborhood for weeks, waiting for the right moment. A father who worked long hours, a child left alone, no alarm system. To them, it was the perfect target. What they didn't know was that the child inside wasn't as helpless as she looked, not with Max by her side. Emma wheeled herself to the kitchen to pour a glass of juice. As she reached for the fridge handle, Max suddenly barked loud, fierce, and unrelenting. The kind of bark that echoed through walls. Emma's heart jumped. "What is it, boy?" she asked, spinning her wheelchair toward him. Max's stance was rigid, teeth bared, eyes fixed on the front door. A slow creak followed. The doorknob turned once, then again. Emma froze, her small fingers trembling on the wheelchair's armrest. The sound wasn't her father's key. It was clumsy, forceful. Someone was trying to break in. Her breath hitched, fear gripping her chest. But Max stepped forward, every muscle tense, ready to defend. Emma whispered, her voice shaking. "Please, Max, don't let them hurt me." The lock gave way with a snap. The door swung open and 2 shadowy figures stepped inside. The door slammed against the wall, and the 2 men entered with quick, heavy steps. They wore dark hoodies, faces partially hidden, their eyes scanning the room with cold intent. One of them muttered, "Easy score, let's make it fast." The other chuckled, spotting Emma in her wheelchair. Emma's pulse thundered in her ears. She gripped the wheels of her chair so tightly. Her knuckles turned white. Who are you?" she stammered, her voice trembling. The taller man sneered, "Relax, kid. We're not here for you, unless you make it hard for us." His words dripped with menace, and Emma's small frame shook. But before either man could step closer, a deep growl filled the room. Max stood between Emma and the intruders, his body lowered, teeth bared, eyes blazing with fury. The intruders froze for a moment, startled by the sudden presence of the German shepherd. "Whoa, easy, dog," one whispered, pulling a knife from his pocket. The blade glinted in the dim light. "Better stay out of our way." Emma's heart skipped a beat. "Please don't hurt him," she pleaded. But Max didn't back down. He barked so ferociously that the walls seemed to vibrate. His growl grew louder, more primal, sending a clear message. "Take one more step, and you'll regret it." The shorter man cursed it under his breath. "This is trouble. I thought you said the house was clear." The taller one smirked. "It's just a kid in a mutt. We can handle this." He lunged forward. In a blur of motion, Max sprang. His powerful body launched at the man with knife in hand, knocking him backward into a chair that crashed against the floor. The knife clattered away, out of reach. The man screamed in shock as Max's teeth snapped dangerously close to his arm. The second intruder panicked, grabbing Emma's wheelchair handles. "Stay still, little girl, or the dog gets it," he shouted. Emma's eyes widened with terror, her body stiff as stone. But Max was far from finished. His loyalty burned like fire, and his fight had Ohm. Emma's breath came in sharp gasps as the intruder's rough hands gripped her wheelchair. The man leaned down, his foul breath hot against her cheek. "Tell that mutt to stop, or you'll regret it," he hissed. Tears welled in Emma's eyes, but her voice came out steady, almost defiant. "You don't understand. He's not just a dog. He's my family, and he will never stop." Max growled louder, his eyes flicking between the two intruders. The man he had knocked down scrambled back to his feet, clutching his arm where Max's teeth had torn through his sleeve. "This beast is crazy," he shouted. The second man tightened his grip on Emma's chair, trying to wheel her toward the door. But Max lunged again, faster than either intruder expected. He clamped down on the man's leg, sending him stumbling with a scream of pain. Emma's wheelchair jerked violently as the intruder lost his balance, and she nearly tipped over before catching herself with trembling hands. "You picked the wrong house," Emma shouted through her tears, surprising even herself with the force of her words. Max released only to attack again. His teeth snapping so close the intruder dropped Emma's chair and fell backward onto the floor. His partner cursed, scrambling toward the kitchen in a desperate search for anything to fight back. Pots clattered, a drawer slammed, and then the glint of metal appeared again. A second knife. Emma's heart pounded. The danger was escalating, and she knew Max couldn't fight them both forever. But she also knew something else. Max wouldn't quit. Not while she was in danger. The shorter intruder, limping from Max's bite, glared at Emma. "Call him off, or you'll be sorry." Dot. Emma lifted her chin, her voice shaking but fierce. "No, you should leave while you still can." The taller man returned from the kitchen, knife in hand, eyes blazing with rage. "Then we'll make you both pay." Max's ears pricked, his body coiled like a spring, ready to strike again, the real battle. The tension in the room was suffocating. Emma's small hands gripped the arms of her wheelchair so tightly her nails dug into the wood. Her eyes darted between the two men, one with a bleeding arm, the other waving a knife with a crazed look. Max stood firm, his growl low and steady, like a thunderstorm ready to break. The taller intruder sneered. "This ends now," he spat, stepping closer with the knife raised. Max barked ferociously, his paws scraping against the floor as he prepared to leap. The room felt frozen in time, Emma holding her breath, Max trembling with coiled energy, and the intruder closing in. Then, like lightning, Max struck. He launched himself at the man's arm, clamping down with terrifying force. The knife clattered to the ground, spinning across the tiles. The intruder screamed, thrashing, trying to shake Max off. But Max held firm, his jaws locked with unrelenting strength. The second man rushed forward, shoving Emma's chair violently. She cried out as her wheels screeched across the hardwood, slamming her against the wall. Pain shot up her side, but her eyes never left Max. She couldn't let fear win, not now. Summoning every ounce of courage, Emma reached out and grabbed the fallen knife. Her small hands trembled, but she held it tightly, pointing it forward. "Stay away from him," she cried. Her voice cracked, but it carried a force that stunned the intruder for a moment. Max finally released his bite, backing toward Emma with protective fury in his eyes. He stood between her and the men again, panting but unyielding. The taller intruder staggered, clutching his bleeding arm. The shorter one cursed, glaring at Emma. "This isn't over, kid. You'll regret this." But Emma, holding the knife with shaking hands, lifted her chin. "No," she said firmly. "You will." The men exchanged a panicked glance. For the first time since breaking in, doubt flickered in their eyes, and Max, with a final deafening bark, drove them back another step. The battle. The intruders hesitated, their confidence rattled. Max's bark echoed through the small house, sharp and commanding, like a warning siren. Emma's hands still trembled around the knife, but her eyes were locked with theirs. For the first time, they realized this wasn't going to be the easy job they had planned. The taller man, clutching his wounded arm, snarled, "We're wasting time. Grab the kid and let's go." The shorter one hesitated, sweat dripping down his forehead. "That dog will tear us apart, man. Look at him." Max's growl deepened, the fur along his back standing like spikes. He edged forward, step by step, forcing them back toward the doorway. Emma, though terrified, felt a strange strength rising in her chest. She wasn't just a helpless girl in a chair not tonight. With Max beside her, she felt like she could stand against anything. Suddenly, the shorter intruder lunged, trying to snatch the knife from her hands. Emma screamed, jerking her chair back just as Max leapt, his body a blur of muscle and fury. He collided with the man's chest, sending him crashing into the coffee table. Glass shattered, wood splintered, and the man groaned in pain as Max stood over him, teeth bared just inches from his throat. The taller intruder staggered toward the door, desperation creeping into his eyes. But before he could escape, Max spun, snarling, blocking his path. Both men were trapped, panic flashing across their faces. Emma's breath came in shaky bursts, but she found her voice. "Leave now, before it gets worse." The shorter intruder struggled to his knees, clutching his side, while the taller one cursed under his breath. They hadn't expected resistance, not from a girl in a wheelchair, and certainly not from a dog with the heart of a warrior. For the first time, they looked less like predators and more like prey. Max barked again, sharp and final, as if daring them to try. And deep down, Emma knew the fight wasn't over yet. But Max was proving that he would. The living room was a battlefield, shattered glass on the floor, overturned furniture, and two intruders breathing heavily, their plans unraveling fast. Emma sat in her wheelchair, her small hands still clutching the knife. Her chest rose and fell with quick, uneven breaths, but her eyes never left Max. He was her shield, her courage, her only hope. The shorter intruder, still on the floor, winced in pain as he struggled to rise. "We didn't come this far to leave empty-handed," he growled. His voice cracked with frustration. "Grab the girl!" The taller man, blood seeping through his torn sleeve, glanced at Max and then at Emma. Fear flickered in his eyes, but desperation pushed him forward. He grabbed a heavy lamp from the side table, lifting it high above his head. Emma gasped, "Max, watch out!" The lamp swung down with brutal force, but Max moved like lightning. He dodged to the side and lunged, teeth sinking into the man's wrist. The lamp clattered harmlessly to the floor as the intruder howled in pain, stumbling backward. Max refused to let go, his growl vibrating through the room like a storm. The shorter intruder, seizing the moment, lunged at Emma's wheelchair. His hands clamped down on her shoulders, rough and unforgiving. "You're coming with us, kid," he hissed. Emma screamed, thrashing, her fingers clawing at his arms, but Max heard her cry. He released the taller man instantly and turned with terrifying speed. His paws thundered across the wooden floor as he slammed into the attacker gripping Emma. The impact knocked the man sideways, sending both him and Emma's chair spinning. The chair tipped dangerously, but Emma managed to grab the armrest, holding herself steady as Max stood between her and the intruder once more. The men were shaken, their confidence broken, but they weren't finished. "Not yet," Emma's voice trembled, but she forced herself to speak. "You should leave before my dad comes home." "He's a police officer." The words hung in the air. The room felt colder now, the silence broken only by Max's low growl and the ragged breathing of the two intruders. Emma's words about her father being a police officer hung in the air like a warning siren. The taller man wiped the sweat from his forehead with his trembling sleeve, his eyes darting toward the door. "We need to get out of here," he muttered. But the shorter one shook his head, rage twisting his face. "No, if her dad's a cop, we can't leave witnesses. We finish this now." His voice cracked, louder than before, his desperation leaking through. Emma's chest tightened with terror. She wanted to scream for help, but her voice caught in her throat. Max stepped forward, barking ferociously, every muscle in his body ready to spring. His growl was no longer just a warning, it was a promise. The shorter intruder lunged at Emma again, but this time she was ready. She yanked the knife up with trembling hands, slashing wildly in front of her. The blade caught the faint light, forcing him to stumble back. "Stay away!" she cried, her voice shaking but powerful. Max seized the moment. With explosive force, he leapt, knocking the man hard against the wall. The intruder crashed to the ground, groaning in pain, his breath knocked out of him. Max stood over him, teeth bared, growling so deep it rattled through Emma's chest. The taller man cursed, backing toward the door, but then froze at the sound of sirens in the distance. The faint wail grew louder, cutting through the night air. His eyes widened. "Cops? Your dad's already called them?" Emma's lips trembled, but she lifted her chin. "No," she whispered. "But they're coming anyway." The man's face went pale. The shorter one struggled to rise, but Max pressed him back down with a heavy paw, snarling with every breath. Outside, the red and blue lights began to flicker against the curtains, and for the first time, Emma felt hope rising in her chest. The nightmare was almost over, but not without one last fight. The wail of sirens grew louder, echoing through the street outside. Red and blue lights flashed faintly against the window panes, cutting through the darkness of the room. Emma's heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. Hope surged inside her, but danger still loomed inches away. The taller intruder's eyes darted wildly. Panic had replaced arrogance. "We have to get out now," he barked, tugging at his injured partner. But the shorter one pushed him off, clutching his ribs, his voice filled with fury. "Not without finishing this. No kid, no dog, no cop is going to ruin me." He staggered to his feet, grabbing the fallen lamp's broken stand. The jagged metal end gleamed like a weapon. Emma froze, her wheelchair pressed against the wall, her fingers clutching the knife so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Max!" she whispered, her voice breaking. Max didn't hesitate. His body was tense, his chest heaving, his eyes locked on the threat. The instant the intruder raised the makeshift weapon, Max lunged with terrifying precision. The crash echoed through the house as dog and man collided, tumbling across the floor. The intruder shouted in pain, struggling under Max's weight, but Max's growl was relentless. Vibrating with a fury that shook Emma to her core, the taller intruder bolted for the door, but the flashing lights outside froze him in his tracks. Police cars screeched to a halt. Boots hit the pavement. Shouts filled the air. "Police! Stay where you are!" Emma gasped in relief, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Daddy!" ... Within seconds, the door burst open. Officer James Miller stormed in, weapon drawn. His eyes wide at the scene before him, his little girl trembling in her chair, Max pinning a man to the ground, and another intruder frozen in panic. "Emma!" he cried, rushing to her side. He dropped to his knees, cupping her face with shaking hands. "Are you hurt?" ... She shook her head through sobs, pointing to Max. "He saved me, Daddy. Max saved me." The flashing lights outside faded as the intruders were shoved into the back of police cars, their threats silenced by cold steel handcuffs. Inside the small house, the chaos slowly gave way to relief. The broken glass, overturned furniture, and bloodstains told the story of the night, but what mattered most was that Emma was safe. Officer James held his daughter close, his uniform smeared with dust from the floor as he knelt beside her wheelchair. Tears streaked down his face, tears of fear, relief, and gratitude. "You're the bravest girl I've ever known," he whispered, pressing his forehead against hers. Emma's tiny hands clung to his, her voice trembling. I wasn't brave, Daddy. Max was. They both turned to the German shepherd, who now sat proudly by Emma's side, chest rising and falling with exhaustion. His ears twitched, but his eyes remained steady, as if to say, "It's over." "You're safe now?" Other officers filled the room, their expressions a mix of shock and admiration. One of them shook his head. "That dog just saved her life. If we'd been a minute." Later, his words trailed off, but the truth hung heavy in the air. Max had been the difference between tragedy and survival. James ruffled Max's fur, his voice thick. "You're not just our dog anymore, Max. You're family. You're a hero." Emma smiled through her tears, resting her cheek against Max's head. "He already was, Daddy. He always was." In the days that followed, news of the break-in spread through the neighborhood. People came by with food, flowers, and tears of gratitude. Strangers stopped to pat Max, calling him the bravest dog they'd ever heard of. And though Emma still couldn't walk, she no longer felt confined. With Max by her side, she felt unstoppable. Every evening, as the sun dipped low and Officer James returned from his shift, he would find his daughter safe and smiling with Max faithfully guarding her. The world now knew what Emma had always known. Courage doesn't come from size, strength.